Hi, everyone, and welcome to ELSAConnect. ELSA is the community of the Lady Shri Ram College alumni, and we are spread right across the globe. And ELSAConnect was started here, initiated in Bangalore by ELSA's here, as a space to come together and engage from mid-March when we started the lockdown during our COVID times. And this has grown, and now today is our 110th session. It's basically a community where we share, we come together, we engage with different topics, we share journeys of ELSAs, non-ELSAs, who are not only based in India, but globally. And those of you who are joining us on YouTube live or will watch otherwise, we welcome you to this ELSA community. Without much ado, I would like to first say that we're very grateful that Pinky, who's a batchmate, is joining us today. And she's going to talk about a journey of the multi-facets that a woman shares and has. And I've known Pinky in one of those facets, and that is at the tennis courts in LSR, where we would play and train together. And when we all go apart in different directions, but when we come together, we are all the same. We are one. And Madhu Khatri is going to be curating the session, an eminent lawyer herself. And what's interesting is that Pinky went to Harvard Law and Madhu went to Yale. And though they may be, completely different schools, as their ground was seeded in LSR and ELSA. So we are here together. Over to you, Madhu, and welcome, Pinky.
Hey, thank you, Vandana. Just small correction, not Yale. I went to Columbia. But
I'm sorry about that. Okay, Columbia, yes.
It doesn't matter in the overall context at all. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be with Pinky on the other side because interviewing her, because her journey is not just multifaceted. I think it's also very inspiring. When I was doing a little bit more reading than I know of Pinky, I discovered she's been writing books. She's got an amazing set of litigation and work that she's done, which I'm hoping to talk to her about because I think they go into, without sounding too grandiose, they are the small steps we talk about when we talk about nation building. And nation building is often done in these small steps when you are not focused on doing it as such, but you're focused on doing your work. And I think that's the journey that I want us to learn from or hear from. So Pinky, there's just so much that there's to talk about. LSR, Harvard, what made you do law? What made you go be a doctorate in law, which isn't really necessary for being the accomplished lawyer that you were going to be anyway? Your journey to public office, for the last 6 years, and this is just only a month ago, I think, that you stopped being additional solicitor general. And for those of you who are not from the law, that is a big public office, outside of the attorney general. That's the second highest law officer of the country, the representative of the government before every single court and the highest courts, and representing public government's view. And in those 6 years as additional solicitor general, no doubt, you've handled some very, very significant cases which have been, I think, which have shaped our thought, which have shaped the law, which have in many ways shaped the justice system and how women are seen or perceived in this country. So I'd love to talk about that. Through all of that, I'm sure you've also faced the challenges of being a woman, a mother, work-life balance. You've probably seen how networks work for women, against women. Love to hear on that. And now, as you stop being the additional solicitor general, you still remain in politics. And that's such an interesting space, again, not for which party you represent, but just the representation of women in politics itself is such an important piece. So, I mean, there's just tons, right? So let me start first by asking you, and I'm going to sort of hopefully through this give you enough time to go through each of these. But let's start with your journey at LSR. I'd love to hear a little bit about your memories there. what took you to law, and then we'll follow on.
Madhu, you are awe-inspiring, as well as I'm a little scared of all the kind of parameters that you put forth for me. But nonetheless, I've enjoyed this conversation even prior to having the one today, when we've interacted with each other. And I think that's one of the greatest things for these ELSA connects, that we actually get across to each other and start understanding each other as people and as persons which are visible and communicable with each other. LSR. I mean, frankly, I'll tell you, Madhu, I have enjoyed every possible institution that I have been in, firstly, as a starter. So that goes right from school to wherever I have been. But LSR itself, I think every possible opportunity, honestly speaking. I mean, there were issues, as there are in some institutions. But having said that, the best academic institution, as it stood for. But I must say that during the times that I was in LSR was not really truly a complete part of the university in a broader sense. And when I look back on it from the days of my university union days, that always stood out. But despite that, the activities of LSR led you on to a complete human being. I think between academics, between co-curriculars, between, as Vandana says, the tennis court, the most enjoyable part of it, the hockey that I played there for the college and represented the college, the debating, the music, the psychology honor students running after us when we went down the corridors and saying, "Would you stop for a survey?" And we almost partly stopping there. So I think LSR gave every possible initiative, and the reasons are very simple. You had the best of the community there. And by the way, as I go down the line, I meet so many people in public life and in my legal profession, and I find every second topmost person is an ELSA, whether that's a secretary, whether that is a person in business, whether that's a person in another professional life or health, or name the subject, believe me, media. I actually am surprised to find so many ELSAs so well placed in life. And I think that comes from the institution. It inculcates in you this feeling of belonging. It inculcates a sense of achieving. It recognizes achievement and thrives on excellence, which by itself I think is one of the grandest qualities, even if you go to another discourse on the subject.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that whole idea of thriving for excellence, uh, where did you start thinking about law?
Oh,
What
just
made,
one minute before I go on to the law. I just want to name a few people who were with me, and still I of course remain very good friends with. So we're talking about people like Naina Lal Kidwai, who is the CEO of HSBC, and of course the first woman at the Harvard Business School. Kishwar Desai, with whom I work on the Partition Museum. We'll probably come to that in the next meeting. You have Vanita Bali, who was heading the Britannica. You have Chitra Subramaniam, who I again look at and as a very dear friend who actually went into investigative journalism and came out with amazing facts on the Bofors, which I think led her on to a stunner in terms of achievements. So I think if you start thinking of people who are within my horizon, in the sense of the same time frame, one really looks at their achievements and says, really, we've reached there somewhere. Sorry, you were talking about law.
yeah, no, no. In fact, that's true. In fact, when you talked about the firsts, perhaps it's also important to bring up that you are the second woman to be the additional solicitor general. So that by itself is also a journey of its own kind, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so law.
Let me tell you, I grew up wanting to be everything. So whether it was from a pilot to an engineer to an actress, there were some remote thoughts of that too. So I went across all surfaces, and in our times, in any case, as you know, the professional life was somewhat limited in the sense of scope. But I actually went on from LSR and went on to management in XLRI. I was the only woman who got selected there, and just between you and me on the discourse, I believe later on I did leave it because I found two issues on that. One, I didn't find it independent enough, which was my perception. I'm not saying it's necessarily fully correct. Second is I actually just wanted to be back in Delhi. So between both these features, I came back to Delhi and I joined the Campus Law Center. Partly because I was impressed with law. I thought law itself had an amazing dimension. It could change life. It was a tool of change by itself and has always been and has become more so now. And of course, the fact that I had my friends and who were there in law, that led me again another direction towards that. But really speaking, the fact that it was a professional life and that you stood out for your own credibility and your own standing, I think that was one of the most major hallmarks in law and its social nuances, I think, which law has, which I've already mentioned.
Have you seen, Pinky, in the legal profession a greater representation of women, or is it easier for women to have been lawyers in any specific areas, whether it was family courts or tougher in criminal courts? What was your own experience around women and the law? Because I think that when I start to look at some of the big landmark cases that you've sort of been part of, they do have a big impact on lives of women. But I'd love to hear how you saw the profession and women in themselves.
Very fairly, Madhu, and you've seen the same era. Basically, you had much lesser women, and you didn't have women in any case. If you had women, you didn't have them in dominant positions or superior positions or in that hierarchy. Somewhere down the line, it was not top down; it was down up, so to say. In the as the expression goes, there were few women and very few women who made it on their own, and very few women who were independent in that sense. So they would work, for example, in juniors or offices. But in any case, the numbers were very low. Talking about yesteryears. Today, the situation has changed, by the way. And there is a dramatic increase in the number of women who are going for law as a profession for two reasons. One, the profession itself has become extremely interesting and inviting, in both in terms of capacity, in terms of payment, in terms of what it tends to reach out to you, and also because of internationalization. Corporatization itself has also lent itself a large way into the profession becoming a very active one. But even so, even today, I would say you still have a marked difference in terms of capacities, in recognitions. You talked about those two fields, you've hit it right there. Now, what happens typically in law, as much as in anywhere the part of the world or India for that matter, is that you do tend to stereotype. So there is always this allocation, and this runs across corporate surfaces from what I'm sure you agree with. The lesser skills development or the stereotyping in saying women are good for one field or another field. So family law, very good. Criminal law, no, no. Now, why is that no, no comes into place? In fact, is a very amazing situation, because criminal law, by the way, has again acquired immense precedence in terms of people's and popularity, so to say, in terms of law. And I think it indeed is more interesting. And I'll come to that when you talk about my book, also possibly. But criminal law, no. Why? Because you're dealing with devious people. B, you're dealing with corrupt people. C, you're dealing with criminals. It's not a good thing. So this is good thing and bad thing concept which goes with criminal law. It's too tough. These are the typical kind of comments that you would find. As far as I'm concerned, I really have spent my time and energies across board in all directions. And even though some of the cases that we did discuss, mention and in fact benefit, of course, women across surface. By the way, that happens a lot. I tried a lot to think about the subject, and you'll always find that happens because A, women are more disadvantaged, like it or not. B, women are victims. And I tried, for example, in my book, which we'll talk about at some point, that I go away from the subject, but it just didn't happen. Every time you picked up any case, you found that the victim, either one way or the other, was a woman. So these are the situations which come across because of social hues, and it's not because one has done them such. But this marginalization or putting, say, let's say a woman is considered very good as a junior, but the woman, when she wants to climb up the ladder, there is a kind of bias towards it. A woman, when she argues very loudly in court, for example, which may be desirable, not desirable, I'm not going there. But a man does it, it's considered very good. A woman does it, it's considered aggressive. So these are the usual kind of statements that are made across board. And I think all said and done, these are the reasons that you find a problem with the gender balance.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're so right that over the years, I have also seen just so many more women who are interested in the law, partly because the profession itself has opened up all these other avenues where you can do corporate, you can do litigation, you can do law firm, and each one of these tended to be a little bit closed and family run or family connected or network connected. But I think increasingly it's getting more and more professionalized. Even in the even in the classroom, like in education, how was your experience comparing what you did at law school in Delhi and what you did at Harvard?
Honestly, a very, very far difference. I mean, we were speaking about it only a couple of days back also with some of my friends. And CLC, which is a premier institution, and in fact, in our times, definitely the premier institution, the Campus Law Center, did give you inputs. It's not that. But I'm afraid the system of education is actually geared around to kind of rote learning. So you're expected to, for example, let me give you one example, even though you're a lawyer, the others are not possibly, but you're expected to remember the sections of a particular provision, statute, for example. Now, what's the need to remember any of these things or to recite them or to actually write them out? There's no need. You can refer to it. So from a far cry from Campus Law Center right up to Harvard, where they said, here's the text. Please go and do an open book examination. So you were totally puzzled. You were given 4 days to say, come back with whatever you have. And in fact, for example, jurisprudence, the idea was that you could do anything. In fact, I went running up after 4 days. I said, I can't improve anymore. This is the best I can do. I did well. That's another matter. But I actually went and forced my way through and said, please take my paper now. You had the open book. You had the take home, which
Yeah,
incidentally, some of the universities have had to resort to these days because of the problem with
yeah,
COVID. And in fact, I argued one of the matters and I cited the instances of Harvard. So Harvard, aside from this system, there was nothing like attendance. They didn't care if you came, and it was your choice, and you needed to be there because there was no way you could duplicate or replicate a class outside the classroom itself. Analysis, I think the greatest part of Harvard is that they taught you to think, and there's no way that you can, there's a learning process in the sense of there's a textbook to it and says you learn in this fashion. It taught you to think, and that stands you a long way. So very often in my discussions with my colleagues or my juniors, they'll say, but why is this? And I'll suddenly pause there, and Campus Law Center, I'm sorry, would say, what is the law? Harvard would say, why is the law like this? Or what should the law be? This is the essential difference, the Socratic method basically going ahead. And I think it's really fun. It's really engaging. And I think it increases your perspectives tremendously.
yeah, yeah. No, but I will plug in a little bit for the law even here.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think very well of the Campus Law Center. I think it produces good people. I
Yeah,
shouldn't name myself as one of them, but whatever way it goes. Today you have 8 Supreme Court judges from the Campus Law Center. So
yeah.
it's not that. I was just comparing. As I said, I always regret saying anything which even remotely sounds negative. I respect, admire, and I have learned a lot through the institution. But it's because it gives you the opportunities of learning by yourself. Harvard, in comparison, gave you the necessary tools to engage in that activity. That's the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, my stint at Columbia taught me the same thing, that mentally we keep making these comparisons. And I think at the end of the day, though, there is something to be said for the profession itself, for the law itself, which is you are being taught to think about how the other person thinks first. This whole adversarial idea of litigation means that before you can perfect what you want to say, you need to better understand what the other person is going to say in defense,
Yes.
in reply. And I think that's what is so marvelous about whether you've studied law here or whether you've studied any other part of the world. It's a way of thinking, and that thinking is in some ways about empathy as well, because when you start to think about the other person, you also start to think empathetically sometimes.
Mhm, mhm.
While for us it's a legal training, but it's also an empathetic training. And actually the reason why I bring that up is because I think being a woman, I see that as in your role in public office as well, you've ended up doing some really important, significant cases, which in some ways I think are a little bit about your job. It's about your legal training. It's about being handed over what you were given to deliver. But it's also about the fact that they probably at some point impact the very community that you're part of, which is, women. So I want you to touch a little bit on a couple of those. And I know there are so many of them, but I did pick one or two out for you to think about and talk to us about, because I think they have sort of a big impact. And the first one I was thinking about was the triple talaq, just because it impacts just so many people. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, its history, the trajectory, the number of times it went up, down, and finally where it ended up?
No, you're right. I mean, triple talaq actually is one of the most symbolic cases. As you said, by today, honestly speaking, there are so many judgments starting literally from the 80s onwards, which have changed the landscape of this entire gender discourse and improved a lot of our community, so to say. But triple talaq in the recent past, I think it signifies not only the victory in itself, but also for the fact that it paves the way forward for a modern India. And incidentally, by the way, one of my very big passions is nation building. So I mean, I really always believe strongly in the fact that whatever we do should build towards that. And the indication that it gave, being a regressive state, you permit practices which are derogatory, What is triple talaq? Triple talaq is basically a man's volition to dictate a talaq and throw his wife out by simply announcing it, and which is what happened in Shaira Bano's case, which led on the battle to right up to the Supreme Court. But what was significant was the fact that by literally a consensus, I mean, this judgment was by a constitution bench. The question was of gender equality, of gender dignity, of the fact that these practices are totally antithetical to the rule of law because you can do so without any reason. I mean, triple talaq can be pronounced without any reason. This 1400-year practice, the fact that we as a community or we as a nation could do away with it actually signifies the importance that we have placed on this landscape of women's issues or gender rights or frankly any rights. The point is, it is a nation going forward and saying practices which can't withstand the scrutiny of anybody's ire, so to say, at this point of time, have to be done away with, and that what is sinful in religion cannot be lawful in law. I mean, these are the principles that the Constitution Bench ultimately held and did away. So we ended with gender equality within the nation. We ended with gender equality outside the nation in the global framework, and we ended in gender equality vis-a-vis women from different parts of communities. So you had three sets of gender equalities all rolled into one. And by the way, after the judgment, there was a change in law, and it actually brought down triple talaq cases to a phenomenal amount of almost 80% as reported.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think it's been a very interesting journey. And the reason why I think it's important for this group, we often talk about women gender issues that affect us. And I'm almost sure that nobody in this room is sort of as intensely affected by the existence of triple talaq. And that's why I suppose in some ways it's very important that we also talk about issues that may be affecting women outside of this room. We still remain, despite all the disparities between men and women, we are still the very, very privileged. And therefore,
Yes.
many times some of these discussions may remain academic, or they may remain hypothetical discussions about a woman I've never met, somebody who's seen, who's been
Mhm.
divorced through a triple talaq. But it's so important for us when we talk about women equality to actually be aware of these things, because at different forums, different places, we're going to be raising our voice about what matters to us. And this is an important thing, which is why I think, what you did in this was remarkable. And also just a quick history of it. It first, like you said, 2017, it remained a bill. Then the government was not able to pass it. Then it put through an ordinance. And then finally in 2019, I think it finally became an act.
You're right. And it outlawed, it criminalized uh, triple talaq itself, and made all the provisions necessary so that you could actually eradicate. See, these are social evils, all said and done. It's not, and I do like, Madhu, one more feature. Whenever we discuss gender issues, I would sometimes like to put it in a different construct. Because what happens sometimes in the over attention on the gender part of it tends to take away from the fact that there is something far more serious in it. This identification or classification is also subject matter of some concern, and I think we should engage in that overall discussion to say it's not only women versus men, and that debate has to always end, but the fact that this is bad, something which is bad has to be done away with, and evil has to be done away with, and you have to get on to life in a progressive manner.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is about also fixing the balance of power. You cannot have this is a classic example of a balance of power where, but the other interesting thing about this was that there is I think it's called the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, which is such a well-informed board, and they opposed the removal of this for two very interesting reasons. One reason was they said, actually, Muslim law allows women to give talaq as well, a triple talaq. So what's the problem? It's equal. And we know that that isn't the case, because
That is it. Yes.
never stacks up like that. And the other thing they said was that in the nikah nama, the woman can actually put into the contract the fact that you cannot do a triple talaq, and once you write that out, then she's protected from a triple talaq. But again, that is premised on the fact that she has the power in the first place to have gone down that whole route.
That is
So
the power positions. You're absolutely right. It's power positions which have to be altered. And sometimes we have to do it. And that's why I say law is a tool of social change, because you can compel that change by making it either criminal or making it actionable. And that, I think, is the essential step of law.
yeah, yeah. And I think I'd love to, because we're short on time, I'd love for you to also move it. This wasn't just about um, Muslim women. You know, a lot of people tend to think that this sort of suited a situation where we wanted to bring in a uniform code, civil code, and therefore this sort of ties in. I think there's another very big, significant development that happened in the recent past, which relates to Hindu women. Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act. And I know that somebody in this group has done a little bit on that as a session, so we won't necessarily go into the details of it. But do you want to talk a little bit about that, how that sort of liberated on the economic and financial side a whole section where there was all this chaos and confusion?
No, Madhu, you're right. See, also when you look at these issues and why there is no parity, or there is disparity in the gender subject, the reasons are various. I mean, it starts from access, it starts from knowledge, it starts from tools, it starts from stereotypes, it starts from mindsets. But really speaking, one of the issues is also financial independence. And financial independence is something which has been denied to women across board by and large in this country, either dependence totally or no rights, and that has been shifting fortunately for us from time to time. So the recent judgment in Vinita Sharma's case, which has been talked about, really marks another period in this entire landscape. So what happened is this traditional concept of Hindu undivided family, where women were not considered to be co-partners, so therefore they had no rights. So this is a short point which is involved in the joint Hindu family inheritance laws. The law in 2005 changed it and made women co-partners as far as rights are concerned in the Hindu undivided family. But the recent judgment, what it did is to say that it is not only for future, it operates on the day you are born. So whenever a daughter is born into a Hindu undivided family, she acquires a right. Now, I must also just share with you at this point the significant changes that it marks herald its own way and a snowballing effect. And by the way, judgments and law takes its own time to change society. It's not as if there is a complete changeover the next day. It gives you a right. How many women exercise that right? We have yet to see. There are not too many cases even now. So it will take its own time, and these kind of discussions and possibly the way forward will come when you translate that into an active social kind of movement. So it marks tremendous changes on financial independence that we women wanted, women need, and you do need to have that step forward and on the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, was it almost 100 years ago that the book was written, A Room of One's Own? Who, I forget the name of the author. What is it? Come back to me. And essentially, that is the same theme, which is that financial independence is the start of any kind of equality. And I think the inheritance laws being retrospective in the way that they have become now is a big part. And all of these things are really all slowly, the social change happens, legal changes happen slowly. One of the areas, Pinky, that bothers, I think, a lot of us is while we talk about these big changes that have happened on the front on, social equality, on financial equality, the physical security of a woman in India today is still deplorable, right? We are considered the most dangerous country in the world for a woman to be in by, various organizations, and we can be dismissive about those organizations, but the fact is that it is a terribly dangerous place for the ordinary woman who doesn't have the wherewithal. There is a rape, by some data that I was reading, every 15 minutes in India. And the Nirbhaya case, where I know you are so deeply involved with, that it did great stuff, but at the same time, it took 7 years to close. And I think today the police, the slowness of the legal system, the patriarchy, the corruption, there's just so much that's going into what makes it so hard for women to be physically safe. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on it. I know you've done some work around rape victims, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, we don't necessarily always have achieved everything that, the end goal is.
No, no, you're right. In any case, I mean, what happens is that in any society, there crime kind of continues. There's no end or final end in sight in any society. And you're right that India is labeled as a rape capital, so to say, of the world. But I really hate it. Now, the fair point is that law itself has made almost any possible change that could have come across the surface to deal with the situation, whether it's punishment, whether it's identification, whether it is description of the offense, whether it is in even things like fast track courts. But but why? See, there are two things. One is prevention, and one is action after the act has happened. Now, everything here turns really on prevention. To take action, law steps in then. So you punish the victims, and fortunately for us, the system has by and large reacted fairly, and very well, in fact, laudably, to the rape victim situation here. So you do have 7 years or not, by the way, Badhu, in a death sentence case, it would be difficult for us to say that over the 3 tiers that the legal system extends across, and the literally the way we safeguard the rule of law, it could be any faster. Sometimes speed is not the only thing. It could have been a little faster, but let us say this, that the death sentence having been awarded is something which is vindicated. This entire situation, you can't have reparation, but vindication, yes, to feel justice has been done, and that is itself a good serving one. But why it happens, I mean, these are the same kind of power situations, the desire to basically punish by such actions. There's perversion, there is lack of security, there is lack of the wherewithal, there's a social stigma. Then there is rape, women would not still want to go forward. There's victim shaming. The victim feels almost as if the victim herself is at fault rather than the perpetrator who's the accused in the case, and therefore would not go forward. There is fear that there will be reprisals from either the people who have done it or people connected to them or from the society. I mean, you do have all this widely across the forum. So I think all said and done, this perception, it's like one of the comments that Modi ji made in 2014. He said, we keep telling women to don't move out, or you be safe, or you ensure your own safety so that you're not attacked, or you're not assaulted, or you're not in any manner harmed. How about educating the men that if this action is done, it is bad, it is something which is socially not acceptable? And you've also had various public people making very strange kind of comments on the subject of rape also, which shows the mindset which goes behind. I mean, things like men will be men. I'm sorry, and it is absolutely abhorrent. So if you talk about it, all said and done, it translates to the position of a woman in society. It translates also to the factum of the awareness of the public institutions to safeguard that very security that has to be done. But most importantly, I think, said and done, we all have to ensure that we can take care of ourselves. And civil society, incidentally, has been extremely active in most situations of any such rape or sexual assault or in any other manner violence against women. And I think that is a very good hallmark for us to set to say it won't be so bad. And you might have been seeing the figures, Madhu, but let me tell you, by and large, rape itself, as numbers go, has not increased. Now, that is partly because of reporting. I'll be honest on that part. But if you see across board, it's between 37% to 27%, 32 to 27% in the last about 6 years. And that is broadly the percentage of the rape cases that are there. It's not good, it is amazing, but also we must limit ourselves. In some, I must say, as far as media is concerned, why all rape cases are blown out of proportion and covered as if it's only happening in India. That's another feature that I think we should look at. Now, you do need to go public. I'm not saying you don't need to go public in a situation, but to what extent we kind of bring up this subject as if this is the only thing happening in the country and nothing else has happened. This is another point of order that I think we need to address to ourselves.
Yeah, I think some of the outrage comes from the horrific nature of those.
Yes.
And, for example, in the Nirbhaya case, I think, and I'll come to the media in a moment, which was a nice segue into the next point. But had the media sort of not gone through that outrage, Nirbhaya case might not have reached the courts in the way. So the horror of it, probably shocked the media and shocked the conscience of, One of the things, though, before we move to the next point around this was when you spoke about what can we do. And I know this group is full of just so many interesting women who are working on social issues. So I'd leave it for some of them to comment, even if it's not a question, around as social activists, what do they see about trying to address the issue of the rapists themselves? Many of them. And while rape remains a weaponization in the hands of a caste-driven politics and a way of subjugating one caste over another, a lot of the rapists themselves have been raped themselves. They've been abused in their childhood. They have grown up very severely, mauled. And for them, violence is normal, abuse is normal. So what they end up doing, in some ways, it sounds terrible, but what they end up doing is something that's normal to them. That's the life they've lived. So all this about reforming and building out something for and how we bring the boys up, how that piece needs to sort of tie in to make a social change is an important one for all of us, who are mothers and sisters and who can see that we can influence the male psyche.
That's the first step. The first step is actually influencing the way we grow up. That really is the first part of access, knowledge, information, bringing up values. I think that's where it all starts, and that's where we need to concentrate the most, not at the tail end, but at the beginning of everything.
Yeah, yeah. And while I don't know whether rape is getting better, I don't know if their numbers are going down, but clearly it hasn't been something that's just new. It's been for years, right? I remember, so the Trials of Truth. Pinky has written this wonderful book, which will read like a spy novel when it talks about some of the criminal cases, but will make you think about a lot of issues where she's picked on social issues. So I encourage you to go read it. I had it lying somewhere. Oh, it's on a digital copy. Yeah, sorry. And so in that, I think you talk about very interesting role that the media played in raising. And I'm sort of quickly moving to. I'd love to hear your views on that. We are all currently seeing this big thing with media, right? Where the reporting has become paparazzi like, where as a result of that, there is on the one hand the conflict of freedom of speech, of what you want to say, and there is defamation and reputation damage that is happening at the same time. And I remember thinking when I saw some of those channels that they really need to be regulated. Uh, I will say that my thought on that changed after I read your book. And I'd love to first hear your views and then perhaps share what I saw in that book that sort of changes the way one thinks about regulating even the worst of media.
No, you're right. These are intrinsic issue to any democratic society, and I'll share with you that this whole debate on whether media should be curbed or there should be guidelines is something that is being engaging the minds of all social activists, including the courts and the rule of law. But one thing is for sure, you can't compromise it possibly externally very easily. The control has to come from within. I think I'll leave it at that for a larger discussion some other time. But having said this, let me go back because we are in different times and different ages. And if you go back about a few years back, you'll find that civil society, and I take media as a very important component of civil society, did help. Now, how did it help? As a watchdog, as a good Samaritan, as a friend. So I think that role that the media played in a number of cases, I think led on, including Nirbhaya, incidentally, by the way, the outcry that happened by the media is something that paved the way for a full trial and finding all of the people who were involved in it put behind and finally, of course, hanged, excepting for the juvenile who managed to get away on account of his age. Even then, the law changed, but that's another story. So, we're going back to just two cases which all of us would identify with in a way because they are similarly placed people as we are. Priyadarshini Mattu, a student, in fact, of Campus Law Center, law student, and who was ultimately murdered, stalked and followed and harassed and then finally murdered. That case landed up into an acquittal because of the judge, in fact, the finding that there was not enough credible evidence, and even though he believed it had happened, so you've read that in the book. But the Supreme Court and the High Court, both High Court and the Supreme Court, reversed that finding. And finally, conviction was held, and life imprisonment is what was given. See, what happens is when you have attention of the media, in some cases, and I'm only talking about that one chunk for the time being, where there is, for example, high public people involved, high important people involved, and there's a question of them getting away scot free because of either problems with the system, lethargies, inefficiencies, corruption, call it what you like, and the fact that systems can be diverted. So, media attention changed the entire focus and the outcome for these hapless victims in Priyadarshini Mattu. And that is why Santosh ultimately was found and guilty and held for life imprisonment. That sentence was not awarded to him finally. Similarly, Jessica Lal. Jessica Lal, again, you have the haves and have nots almost. a waitress in a bar, and a small dispute leads on to a murder, and then you have a person getting away scot free, possibly. You have people turning hostile, all witnesses turning hostile, that their testimonies are not supporting the case. There's also, of course, some stories about a third person somewhere being engaged. This happens in criminal law, by the way. But Jessica Lal again uh, galvanized the entire machinery into action, and the galvanizing factor was the media. Of course, I will add that civil society was equally a part of it. So whether you want to call media as absolutely separate or part of that, be that as it may, the outcome of the case and the punishment and the conviction is really flowing from the media's attention that it gave. And I think to that extent, media shapes the way for a case to come to its rightful conclusion, and which otherwise may have gone differently. So that is not what is canonically called as media trial. I would say that is something which is called civil society action, and media is a very important component and is played. Why now? You go back to Billa Ranga's case. Billa Ranga's case, which happened while we were at the university, and I mean, we were all had shivers down our spines when we saw these two young kids being murdered. The fact that there was so much media attention, and of course, those days it wasn't only electronic, had so many witnesses coming forth. People came forward to help because they came to know of what had happened as a bizarre incident. For society to respond, society needs to know, and that knowledge, possibly media has been a very helpful, and also of course the outcry saying something this happened is bad, needs attention. So on both counts, I think media as a watchdog and a good Samaritan has really done its part, and possibly will continue to do its part. The other issues are the larger subject of discussion, but be that as it may, we are all there to say in a democracy you have a right to speak, but whether that speak can be untrammeled, that is a question that I think we all need to address, and to what extent you can lay down guidelines for that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's very interesting. And these are indeed the cases which tell you that even where the fourth estate, so to speak, errs in the way it deals with it and loses all control, um, a lot more would be lost if we were to say we need to have how media reports or controls, because where the system fails you either due to corruption or incompetence, and all these three cases had a mix of both,
Yes.
where at a trial court, somebody has done away with it and dismissed the case, or where somebody belonged to somebody, the police commissioner's daughter or son or whatever, and so therefore they were going to get away with it. The fourth estate screaming, shouting, hysterical screech has actually come to the aid of justice finally. Yeah, and it's interesting. Although I have to say that there was this very interesting element that I did not know about the Nanavati case. The Nanavati case has now become a movie. Apparently, I haven't seen it. But for those of you who have seen the movie or not, you must read this, because in that Nanavati case, it seems like the Blitz, which was the magazine run by
Karanjia, RK
Ranjit,
Karanjia, yes.
yeah, I mean, he was outraged that this Parsi man who had done an honorable act of, defending his honor should now be hanged for murder. And so that media essentially ended up in the reason why he was acquitted in the first instance.
Yes, blitzed its way through.
Blitz its way through. Yeah. And yet another time when the Taj terrorism attack happened, 26/11, again, there was a lot of negative reportage about how the constant reporting actually had the terrorists in sight, because they were able to get the state of affairs. And
You're
so,
telling me I was devastated because you could actually see that event happening, and how could this be allowed to be shown? In fact, most countries have laws that prohibit such kind of reporting. Prohibit. I mean, one is to say you should or should not do, but actually prohibit, because it's a national security which is involved. And if you can actually see where they're going, and somebody's telling you behind, oh, that man is going there. I mean, and the investigative agencies are trying to nab this person. Obviously, it is something which is totally uncalled for.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's interesting to hear and read from your book about and on the media thing. And I have to say, I changed my views about letting the media do what they were doing only after I read Trials of Truth. But, I have to keep jumping on every topic because there's just so much that you have done in law and litigation. And now you are not additional Solicitor General, but you're still part of politics. You are in the BJP. And I'm just wondering, where does Pinky go from here? 3 days from now, we have the Bihar elections. And I was thrilled to see that there are women representatives in there, people who've come from London School of Economics and are fighting as an independent party. And there's a whole bunch of other women who are sort of probably, if they get a chance, become over a period of time more representative in, and as we get more women into those local legislations. There's somebody who's running a panchayat, I forget her name, she's the head of her local panchayat, and she's the role model for how panchayats should be run, and she's standing for elections. And so the professionalization of elections, of women in there, I think the obvious question to you is, where do you see your politics?
See, I'll tell you, Madhu, honestly speaking, I have always worked and I have not necessarily seen that there is a position that I need to reach to. But while we are talking about this, I would share with you one factor. In politics, indeed, there's been a tremendous change as far as women are concerned. And even today's morning newspapers were talking about Bihar elections and the fact that you had much larger percentage of women voters who were coming forth. And by the way, in 2019 elections, the last Lok Sabha elections, you actually had the gender difference being reduced only to 0.4%. And that is one of the most amazing developments. Of course, how much it translates into active positions, there's this hierarchical thing. So you come till here, and then the one ceiling comes here. The glass ceiling is not only on the top, there are several levels of ceilings which you have to go through. So the ceiling is there, but nonetheless, in political participation, and I think that is one of the greatest changes that has happened in this country, that you have only a 0.4% difference between women and men voters, and a lot of women who are voting in their own right, in the sense of not basing their judgment upon their husbands, their fathers, their families, etc., which was a very traditional way. So, in a very short story, I'll tell you that, I mean, rather just a line. Earlier, the children or the wives used to sit behind the fathers or the husbands, as they were, and they used to go there. They used to not even know and just mark their pen and give the vote. Of course, electronic voting came in at a point of time. Now it is that the daughter is going on the cycle and says, "Papa, chalo tumko voting ke liye le jata hu." So these are the differences that are being reflected across society, and of course that is the biggest thing, because you need to have women as agents of social change. You need to have women as agents of political change. You have people in policy, you have people as CEOs, you will have a conversion in the corporatization. You have women as Supreme Court judges. You have only two, by the way, at this point of time
Yep.
in the Supreme Court out of 34, and you have about 78 in the various high courts of the country. So you will have that translation, and India has a very peculiar feature. You have women at the top in almost every field that you can count upon, whether it is politics, whether it's profession, whether it's business. You have the topmost people all there, but you don't have a decent conversion at the higher levels of the ladder. So not at the highest, but even the higher level. So it starts, there's this leaky pipeline theory. You start, you're very good at the under level, but then when it goes on to mid level, it reduces. When you go to the higher level, it reduces even more. So, for example, in corporate world, I believe it's like 1% at the top, and similarly, you'll find it almost across board. So where do I see myself? I don't know. I just work, and I keep. This is one thing that I love doing. I love working in a variety of fields, but I do enjoy public life. I have had my share of elections, and I'm happy to do anything which goes towards that effect, whether it is in one capacity or the other. And I will always have a capacity, so it will always go in that direction. But I think the public life engagement, by the way, on a front on this while we're speaking, is, I think public life engagement is a very important part that all of us should definitely be a part of. We shouldn't remain confined to our individual lives, whether it is personal or whether it is professional, but we should transcend ourselves beyond that barrier.
Yeah. So in public life, and I think this will probably be the last one, I'm hoping that there's people who want their questions answered, so therefore I need to stop. In public life, you probably find yourself in conflict sometimes with who you represent, whether it's the government or a minister or elsewhere. How do you deal with that? I've seen that in corporate life, where employees will get together and say that they need to have their employer not work with the US government or not work with this one because they're ethically not aligned, and corporations are back down listening to their employees. Have you faced situations like that when you are working with the government? You've spent 6 years in a very critical position, and some of these cases that you have dealt with are in some ways very difficult journeys of how they've come to fruition, but in many ways they are also likely to have been places where you found the support of the government in what you wanted to do. But when you don't find that support, or you find that there is a dissonance between your intellectual take on what's happening, how have you dealt with it? Have you faced it?
I'll be very fair. Look, as a professional, and I'm not talking as a person, I'm saying as a professional, it is my duty and my job to basically take up the situation as far as my instructions are concerned or the belief of the government is concerned, as it was the case, as you're saying, as ASG. So you represent the government, you're given a particular platform to represent the views of the government. So it's not my views that have to come across. So by and large, one is able to manage that fairly well. As and when there is any serious dissonance or dissonance, so to say, rather not dissonance, then you actually can either uh, not take up the case. I mean, that is basically what you can do. Fortunately, I haven't had to do that. But there can be such situations in a professional life where you find that you can't really do, and this is supposed to be part of your ethics, that you can't really do something effectively and efficiently and with the belief. But otherwise, as a professional, it is your job to basically represent the views of your client, unless and until you're convinced that there's something wrong in that process, in which case you can take a sideline on that and not really do the necessary case.
Yeah, but sorry, I missed you. Did you say that you haven't faced that sort of a
I
situation?
haven't faced. I haven't faced. Fortunately, one way or the other. And then again, as a lawyer, it's your job to basically put forth a view. You're not the judge. You're not deciding the issue. You're basically putting forth a view within the parameters of what is there within this field of law or the basis thereof. So you really speaking, you are going ahead with that, and it is your job to give that position of law. What happens with that case ultimately is going to be by the judge who's hearing the matter and will finally adjudicate the respective positions. And you do have an opponent. But as I said, I didn't have to, fortunately, in any situation, face that problem. So it wasn't difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I don't stop, others don't get a chance. So I have to. And I'm hoping that everybody else, I can't see Sandhya in any privately message. So if you can also run it, who has a question? Pooja has written a very,
Questions are there. If I may come in, Madhu.
yes, please.
Questions, the names of the people are there. If you look in your
Yeah,
chat,
wonderful,
please.
wonderful, wonderful. Preeti, we'll give you first start. Go ahead. Are you there, Preeti?
Myself. Yeah. Hi, Pinky. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and Madhu for really beautifully curating it. I'd really like to know, you did mention that personal and professional is separate. Or well, you did delineate the two. But can you now comment on the state of the judiciary in India? The fact that the judges are in the news every day, judges are deciding their own cases, somebody's getting a governorship. There is so much of noise around the judiciary right now. And in a democracy, if the judiciary is in the news, is not that a stinging comment on our democracy or on the institution of the judiciary? Can you comment, please?
Yeah, Preeti, you raised.
I'm a
extremely-
journalist, so
Okay, okay,
forgive me.
okay. Got that. So, I mean, there are two parts of this response. One is that in a democracy, any issue can be raised, and if it is raised by itself, that is not something which is a negative for any reason. But yes, there are certain questions that have been raised which possibly are uncomfortable, and we do need to see what is happening. I mean, even the recent kind of reports that have gone out regarding a particular judge, and to what extent that can really be used in any manner to dislodge the process is something I don't want to be. I'm sorry, I will not deal in anything very specifically. I'll go on a generality more than that because we can't do that as far as I'm concerned. But having said this, as I said, I think we need to be very clear that we need to keep our judicial institution, which is one of the strongest institutions in the world, by the way, and that's one of the reasons we've made headways. And it's also the institution of last resort. So today in the country, a citizen has a problem. All said and done, the belief in the fact that the judiciary is there and it will take care of its interests is something that is very heartening. And whether they reach out the judiciary or not, the belief itself is something which keeps the citizenry going forward. So it's not a good thing for anything to be in the news as far as the topmost parts of the judicial system are concerned. But I'm not sure some of the criticisms that have been levied are right also. I mean, in terms of what could happen, whether a judge can take a certain position, cannot take a certain position, there's no bar against that whatsoever. Whether the judges should decide their own cases, again, by the way, this has been the subject matter of a decision by the court itself, and it's worth reading. So, when a constitution bench hears a matter which arises out of a dispute between two cases, or rather anomaly between two cases, there doesn't appear to be any bar, and this has been it's a very seasoned judgment that should be read in its own self to show how the question is of constitution bench, because constitution bench itself is comprising of several judges, each of whom might have heard similar cases or cases connected to the issue in hand. Each of them has a separate viewpoint that they can take, and any one judge who has taken a certain view in a certain subject is not precluded from hearing the matter, because he's only one amongst many, and every judge in any case is entitled to their view. And of course, the final view being that the judge can change his view.
Quick one, next one. Pooja, do you have, turn your cameras on, those of you who are asking questions for sure. So Pooja.
Thanks, Madhu. I hope you can see me.
Yes.
Great, perfect. So yes, a question for Pinky. So maybe this question is related to Pinky having the position you're being. So first of all, let me just congratulate you. It's very heartening to see a fellow ELSA at such a podium. And, and I think this question kind of lends itself to having that position and what we do with those positions. From LSR, I also had the privilege of moving to the US and studying in the American system, which forces you to think. And maybe this is what, as ELSA and partly forcing you to think comes. So as a woman, I've been in corporate, but I feel like, maybe kind of going back to your point on women being in various benches across India in various positions, somewhere, maybe, and this is my perception, I'm fully taking credit for a wrong perception, that there is a lot of lip talk in the women's position, right? So I feel like unless women are actually promoting other women or bringing in what I call a woman's perspective of doing things, I do believe there's a way to success in a woman's method, but unless that's recognized as a way to success, how do you really make that happen? And the question for Pinky, you here is that how did you do it as a woman? Is it that you give in to the man's perspective and say that I'm going to do it the man's way, whatever that may be? Or you do it in the woman's way. And I say, I've laid some precedents and some methodologies for other women to, whatever style they tend to bring to that, that style will come through as a woman's way of achieving and not be taken down as something that a woman cannot achieve because it's different, and difference is not accepted. So just like you to comment on that, Pinky, it'll be great to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
I've never taken no for an answer. And I've never seen myself as doing something because I'm a woman. I cannot really put you into that, two folds, you say, a woman's way and a man's way. I only believe that whatever needs to be done should be done in the manner that it is to be done. I think we have certain lack of tools. I'll take that with you. But at the same time, with sufficient support. And I think if you have basically knowledge, education, confidence, ambition, which all are sometimes considered not to be the most greatest hallmarks for women, and that is what women are deprived of, these tools. And I would say definitely the support, because I've honestly speaking, nobody's ever challenged me for what I'm doing. If I do something, it was always said, yes, good, carry on. So whether it was riding a bike or fighting DUSU elections or campaigning in the middle of the night or having a dharna in the Delhi University, or whether it was going to Kishangarh to fight elections or to going to Bhagalpur to fight elections, I really was never stopped at anything. So that's been one of the biggest advantages, which I don't know how much it can translate across surfaces. But as I said, fortunately, nobody has really stopped me from doing what I do because I'm a woman. And I have never felt that way. So I think the best criteria would be not to give this fine line and to deny to us or say we need to equalize. That's why I always say don't talk about equalization. It's a freedom of choice. I want to do something, I'm able to do it. There's this democratic deficit. I think it should be an asset situation, not a kind of value system that needs to be imported. I can do something, well, fine. If a man can do it very well, it doesn't matter. Whoever can do it well is somebody who should be there in a position to do it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pinky. I could come back with something, but this is not a debate. I do take your perspective. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think, Pooja, the point you're raising is a very, very big topic. I think the issue about women not recognizing their own limitations and not allowing themselves to be socially conditioned. But at the same time, no matter what you do with that, there is, and I have also now sort of sensed that in so many places where the social conditioning is so strong that the women themselves are unable to get out of how they
That's
feel
true.
they may be the primary caregiver. When the child is sick, they will be the ones to go to school, they will look after the. So there are all those things, and then there is the behavioral issue of, can you succeed as being a woman with the skills and the virtues of being what we call collaborative and nurturing in the corporate world especially, and how do you change that perception as well? No, it's a very, very interesting topic, and we'll bring Pinky into it for another time for sure. But in the meanwhile, we've got one more question, Pragya, and then Sahana. Pragya, are you there? You're on mute, I think. You're on mute. Okay, so somebody may need
to... You can unmute yourself.
Hi.
All right.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Pinky, that was a lovely, very inspiring session. I just wanted to ask you, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in life so far?
The biggest lesson I've learned as a woman, or just generally?
Whichever way you want to.
The biggest lesson I've learned is take pride in what you are doing and have the confidence in what you're doing. In fact, I'll just share with you I think the plaque of honor that ELSA gave, which is something which is possibly answers some questions. For the courage of her convictions, the award was given, and this was a notation, for the courage of her convictions and her indomitable spirit in turning challenges into opportunities. So I think that somewhat puts one into a fold. And I think, as I said, never say no. Just move forward. These are some of the criteria and some of the biggest things. But I told you one thing which definitely I think is of big importance: public life and public engagement. I think we need to get out of our cubby holes and say, the real world is out there, and we need to share with each other all the experiences which we can come with. And this is across board. So law is not law alone, nor is medicine alone. This intermixing of values and intermixing of nurturing, intermixing of thoughts, I think is what gets you across surface.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Shahana, you have a question.
Hi. So mine is, that's me here. I'm a teacher in a college, a women's college. So I think what I want from you would affect a whole lot of people. It's less a question and more a clarification. What you were talking about in terms of rape or about the media triggered a thought in me that in India, everything is extremely complex, and whatever we see is just the tip of the iceberg. So a rape is never a rape, but it is a statement of caste, privilege, class. Similarly, what we talk about in media is never really free. And while I absolutely accept that all journalists have to have subjectivity, have to have an opinion for it to have any sense, but today these opinions, this subjectivity is itself influenced by ownership of political agenda, political parties. In that context, looking only at the numbers of the rape or the activism of media, isn't that a little simplistic? So I'd like your clarification on that.
No, you're right. I'm not saying these are the only answers, but this was the context in which you were speaking. So the fact that there is this entire power structures, perversions, structural imbalances, each of which leads to the subjugation of women and the assaults on women, I'm not going away from there. We were only speaking in some particular context of media's attention and how media did help in these directions, and where we must give credit to the devil also. So, you must give all credit to whichever institutions help to pave the way forward, because these have been landmark situations which have changed the course of legal history. Going back to Nirbhaya's case in India Gate, when people are protesting and the media kind of really spread that up, that itself was one of the biggest things that propelled Nirbhaya's case onto its own logical consequence, which came. But yes, there are a number of features which are responsible for this perversion in society, and we do need to address those, and that stretches across all board. So in any of the gender issues, you could take them up as one of the same. You have these other further equations. Power always positions are there, whether it's caste based or not caste based, community based, economic based, perversion based, and it stretches across surface. So therefore, I always find that this is only an expression of this imbalance, all said and done. So this idea of rape really it's not only a physical act, it's actually a part of subjugation as much. So the whole thing, to put the perspective straight, is to really change the subject of discussion, to make more focus on it, and what See, we as lawyers, in any case, we see the tail end. Act has happened. You're looking at, by and large, what to do with the situation so that you can have the deterrent effect of law. So the law comes into place after an act has happened, punishment happens, and the signal is supposed to go out saying, this is bad, this is something which is unacceptable in society, and if you do it, you will be punished, which has its own positive effect. But having said that, there are so many causes that lie behind this perversion that we need to definitely look at them, each of these factors, and very closely, and how much we can change them. But then social structures are there. You do need to work at each of these levels, and you as a teacher, I can understand you looked at them very closely, and would like to study them to see how to actually go forward with this. But this is where the debate is always ongoing.
Yeah,
Lovely. Thank you.
Hannah, you did what you touched on is the corporate ownership of media today. I mean, we didn't touch on that topic, but for sure that has skewed the whole value of what media is trying to achieve. I see two questions, Gunjan, and then I saw Vinita raise her hand as well, though it's not in that list. So with Gunjan and then Vinita.
Yes. Also, Geeta Varghese is there, Madhu.
Oh,
I've sent her private thing. Yeah.
all right.
Hi, Pinky.
Hi. Yes.
Hi. Very nice to see you and great session. My question might sound a little immature, but I think I can take that liberty with a college senior. On that pretext, a lot of countries have very extreme steps for rape victims, which means public execution, sometimes even, public, public shaming, basically. So, and a lot of youngsters have sort of brought that up, that what if we had some of those kind of measures taken up? I know India is not a country which believes in too much violence, but if those kind of steps are taken, I think one or two successful execution of the criminals, which we are very sure of, for example, the Nirbhaya case, there was no doubt about it, all
Yes.
proves everything there. So do you think those kind of measures, just 2 or 3 good executions, could be a great example for a lot of those people who really need fear to get out of these kind of acts like rape? Just your comment and take on this.
Between you and me, tell me, isn't death sentence good enough in that sense? You are
But
going through an entire process of law. So I'll be fair and say this, that I do believe in the rule of law, and you have to believe in it in order to be there as a good citizen, so to say. Somewhere down the line, you have to have faith. You really, this response that we are having as youngsters, as people, as human beings, to say, let's have an outrageous reaction against the accused. I mean, for example, in the Nithari case, I'll just share with you. I mean, the man was denied any legal practitioner's assistance. Now, that might sound good to somebody when they're thinking about the fact that there should be this outcry that it doesn't deserve a defense. But I'm afraid from where I come, I can't think like that. And I do not believe in public kind of executions. I do think you need to have a sustained. We've gone away from those barbaric devices and whatever else happened to execute people so that you have those situations. You have a death sentence in this country, which is, by the way, done away with a number of countries. So we still retain that, not for rape, for murder we do have, and by and large, rape ends in murder. And that is another debate, but I'll not go there. So all I'm saying is, I do think that death sentences and having them and life imprisonments, even life imprisonment itself, is something which does its own effect, and we don't need to have a public display of that. In fact, public display by and large has been frowned upon. So it might seem desirable. So today we all want to hang a person literally on the streets, but we do have to retain our hold as a recognized democratic society, and to say we have to follow processes. Because what happens, I mean, for example, what happened in America, I mean, just look at what happened there. You can't take the law into your own hands and say, I'm going to do this right away. There'll be anarchy. We can't have that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think, Gunjan, you might want to read a little bit about capital punishment not really having worked as a deterrence, the data around the world. That'll sort of be an interesting perspective for you to have as well. Vinita, you're the next question.
Great. Thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Hi, Vanita.
And great to see you, Pinky. Literally, I'm seeing you after a century.
Yes.
Since the last century. But, hopefully we'll connect. Pinky was 2 years junior to me in LSR. So, it's wonderful to hear your perspective, really. So, very quick question. I know it's a big one. But, we've been talking about judicial reforms for the longest period of time. And, you look at statistics like the large number of under trials, how long does it take to even settle something as simple as, a rent case in a city like Delhi. If you had a choice, what are the 3 things that you would do by way of judicial reform?
I mean, I have worked a lot on judicial reform, and I come up with
That's
far
why
more
I'm asking you the
suggestions,
question.
more than three possible solutions. But I think, where we do lack is by and large procedure and infrastructure. So that really comes to the entire process. Today we have about 3 crore cases pending all over India, and it has been a struggle for most of us to dispose. I have been fairly lucky in a number of cases, I must say. But having said that, that's not my issue. The question is of general thing, and we have and are constantly coming up with mechanisms which reduce, for example, for insurance claims, for example, for motor accidents claims. We are coming up a lot with mediation. So that is something which we've been trying to transform the surface. We are coming up with alternative dispute resolution, which is arbitration. So that is one part, these entire structuring so that we can improve and expedite the processes of disposal. The second part, as I said, is definitely we require a larger infrastructure. And incidentally, online hearings are going to show some of their own way forward, for the reason that you're having a different kind of system in disposing online. It ultimately may be more efficient in a number of ways. For the time being, of course, it's on a lower ebb. The litigation is not at the highest ebb because of the different procedure adopted. But I think online working can find a very useful way if it's a hybrid use along with regular court machinery. The infrastructure, to the extent of where the provisions are made for the courts to be functioning, both in terms of actually resources as much as the judicial strength. Very often there is a large number of vacancies which are not available. And no, there's a fourth one, which I think is most important. I think what we have to be able to do in our system is to avoid adjournments. I think somewhere down the line, our system believes that adjournment is a birthright. And we also as lawyers are partly responsible for that, partly or whatever extent. So somewhere down the line, there has to be strict action, A, for adjournments, and B, for illegal action. I mean, there has to be a cost built into vexatious litigation. So in both ways, we need to come forward with a formula which will work and prevent people, while at the same time strengthening these alternative lok adalats, any mediations which you can do. Because and I think one more thing, sorry Vanita, one more thing I have in mind for us Indians. We are also by and large litigative. I must say that in India, what happens is when a litigation starts, it almost goes right up to the top. So somewhere down the line, we have to be able to believe in pre-litigative mechanisms. So basically to ensure that there is less reason for the litigation to occur. And if it does indeed occur, how to resort to settling that particular issue. So the pre-litigative thought process, which happens all over the world, is something that we need to build in more into our system.
Yeah, I've often thought very simple. If you just limit the number of adjournments a case has, it's not indefinite. You just say, okay, X is the number. And, if the lawyers on both sides can't get their act together, then, well, too bad.
But Vanita, while at the same time, I mean, 110%, I agree with you and I'm there. I personally really don't like adjournments in any manner whatsoever. And hopefully I don't go for them. Maybe in a case or two I might have. But having said this, today we are coming to a situation where we are talking about written submissions. We're talking about limiting time, because if you limit time also for arguments in court, which is the same function that staying adjournments to a certain limit also helps. I think if we work around these very basic fundamentals, it could change the landscape of judicial pendencies and arrears which are there.
Great. More questions when we get together for a cup of coffee.
Absolutely. You must share your number with me, Vanita.
Yes, I will.
I will too.
Now, that was a great question. And I think the point around technology and the adoption of technology into the legal process, we are the slowest amongst all professions to have adopted technology. And that just translates into online, whether it's adjournment, speed, access, of people around the country. This is a big transformation. If just that's one structural reform, if it had to be one word, one language, one thing to be used, I would say the better use of technology, which, Pinky, you touched on. We have the one final question, I think, with Geeta.
Hello, I'm Geeta Varghese. One hears of landmark judgments which have taken society forward. Like I come from the Syrian Christian community where Mary Roy's case was a landmark judgment, which was really celebrated by women of the community. Now, when you hear of a case like what happened in MP, where the judge has given a ruling that the rapist should go to the house of the victim and ask the victim to tie a rakhi on the rapist, is he not overstepping his jurisdiction? And is there a system where there is a watchdog which sees that judges don't bring their social biases into judgments, like the quality of judgments given are not like that at the first instance, instead of somebody having to, take it to a higher court or something? Internally, do you have a system which sort of monitors the judgments being given across the country? I'm a lay person, so I don't know. But this particular instance, I felt, how could a judge come out with such a judgment?
No, you're right. I mean, not only this kind of statements, there have been other judgments where people have said that you should consider getting married to the accused, to the rapist. Several such cases have come to light. But I'm afraid at the high court level and at the higher court even than Supreme Court, there is a system of monitoring judgments. The only process is of setting them aside in appeal or of any kind of observations by the higher court being passed. We can't, because of judicial independence, I'm afraid there is no system being evolved in that respect, and possibly it might be difficult. So there is a system in place which is of appeal. And you're right, as preposterous as the suggestions do sound, it is something that should definitely be set aside, and that's the best we can do. But there is one other thing which is happening today, which wasn't there earlier. The training of judges. You are finding a number of centers that have been put up all through the country, National Judicial Academies, which actually trains judges. And I think today the training process is far more imbibed within the judges, so they get a chance to actually learn the true values. But the last word, you actually cannot take away the man from the social belief. All judges are humans, all said and done. So therefore, you have to work more on the social belief on a separate platform, rather than to say you take away. How do you divorce a person from their beliefs? Every person, wherever they are, whichever capacity they are, will have a belief. Right or wrong, that's not a matter. So I wish I could find something even more favorable to say, but the position only today is a higher court which can set aside an order in appeal, and possibly which might have other effects, but not in any other manner. There's no, let's say, punishment that can be given for a wrong observation, or even a suggestion that is not found to be very conducive to everybody's well-being.
I see, but it smacks a little of lack of professionalism. That when you become a professional, you need to be able to distinguish between your personal biases and your professionalism. So to that extent,
you are 100% right. All I was trying to demonstrate was that you have judges from all across every community, every part of the country, having different kind of social ethos, educational ethos. All I'm saying is that judges are persons, so therefore would have certain value systems. But you're right, the legal application of principles should not be based upon any kind of prejudices or beliefs.
Okay, thank you.
This has been such an interesting session that I have missed on the cue that I was given to invite Kaveri to announce the next session. Can I please ask Kaveri to come in, and then I will close?
Thank you, Madhu. And it's been a very, very special evening. Thank you so much, Pinky, for this wonderful session. And Madhu, I must say, for every time you brought this together, the threads together, it was something that I was learning as a curator. So I take this privilege to announce the next session for Tuesday, 27th. It is with an Elsa from Bengaluru, Rimjim. Rimjim Roy has been my junior in history, but junior by over a decade, and she's from the 2014 batch. She is currently a brand strategist with DDB Mudra Group. Some of us have seen the advertisement that she created for the RCB, and she circulated it on our WhatsApp group. So Rimjim has come up with something very interesting. She says that personal storytelling is what she would like to talk about. So let's wait to hear more from her. Something interesting that she has revealed is that she is a brand strategist by the day, but at night she is working on her first novel. I must say, Pinky, it was a privilege to be on this session. What I take away from this one is that we must transcend from our personal and professional lives into the public. I'll keep that with myself. Thank you so much for this session of ELSAConnect. I hope to see you all on Tuesday. Thank you. Over to you, Madhu.
Wonderful. No, thank you. Thank you. So everyone who's been on this session, you can see the power of the networking. That was a question I did intend to ask Pinky about how to better utilize this network and the power that this group has. as a community across diverse areas, ages, experiences. And I hope that this one thing that is going on will, bloom into many, many more things. I also wanted to ask you, Pinky, what you do for free time, but I think to ask that question, I would have to give you back your free time now.
Very quickly, Madhu, I'll share that I think networking is a very important component, and one of the gender imbalances is based upon non-networking. So the fact that you put this together, and believe me, Madhu, I don't know whether I was answering or you were answering, or who was the more effective answer, so to say. So having said this, one of the most brilliant curators that I have seen, thankfully you're a lawyer, so my own community, but keep this network on, inter-exchange of ideas, personalities, visions, thoughts, it all counts. Every little bit counts. Boon boon se nadi bane, nadi nadi se sagar, that kind of statement. So the more we interact with each other, we can see where we are right, where we are wrong, what we can lend to each other. And that lending is what takes you to grow to be a better person than what you are, or a higher person, if you like, to what you are. I think, and also, I always say, whenever I, for example, go for media programs, one thing I come out from there is I hear different perspectives and I learn. So there's so much learning which is involved, not only in my speaking. I speak. When I speak, when I hear Madhu Khatri and I hear Shahana or I hear Vandana, and they cross question me, I also get certain questions posed to myself, and I also have to have a relook. So you need to keep regurgitating this entire process so that we can take the way forward. Free time, golf, walking, music, tennis, rarely, but I would come there. I love watching films. I'm watching Netflix these days, Blacklist every evening, 40-minute serial. I enjoy my family. I have a terrible work-life balance. I have no balance at all. I live on an imbalance. I've accepted that much. I was told a while back, and I think all of us should accept that we can't be perfect in everything. So learn to live with these mini or major imperfections and survive as you can go there. But I would like to happily go down singing, dancing, and doing whatever I can to make my way go forward as a butterfly, if you like. Life is beautiful, and let us keep it that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that we can go on forever, but we cannot, which is besides of the point. Thank you again. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this. Looking forward to the next session. Pinky, a big, big thank you.
Thanks so much.